Everybody, we're just gonna take a couple more minutes here, wait for a few more people to trickle in, and then we'll get started. All right, it's a couple minutes after, so might as well get it started now. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for joining us for this webinar on the 2024 Mobile Source Emission Reduction Grant for the overview of the RFP. My name is Matthew Hoskins, and I'm joined today by Sheila Blanchard, who will be doing the presentation. So I've got a few housekeeping rules before we get started. All attendees will be muted during the webinar. Questions can be submitted in the Q&A box down in the right-hand corner and will be addressed during the question and answer time at the end of the presentation. The raise hand feature will be disabled until the question and answer time and will only be considered for those who are calling into the webinar by phone. For those who are calling in, if we've got anybody, you can press *3 and that will raise your hand, and press *3 again to lower your hand. All of the other attendees must use the Q&A box to submit their questions. Also, this webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the DAQ website at a later date. Finally, we have 1 hour scheduled for this webinar, but if we manage to wrap everything up early, we have the option to adjourn early. If we are not able to answer all of the questions by the end of our time, we will let you know how to get your questions to us. So with that, I will now hand it over to Sheila Blanchard for today's presentation.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sheila Blanchard. I'm the environmental program consultant. I manage the state DERA grants that come out every year. I've been doing this for a couple of years, so hopefully I'll be able to answer your questions today. And thanks for coming out. So let's move to the next slide. Uh-oh. Okay, so here's what you can expect today. This is the first of 2 webinars that will talk about the RFP that opened on October 15th, which is for the DERA state grants. This is an annual grant that we annual amount of funds that we get every year to grant out through the DERA program. So this is the 2024 grants. So I'm going to give an overview of this program and what it's been, and the kinds of projects that you can use these funds for. I'll talk about eligibility, which includes the entities that are eligible, as well as the kinds of projects that are eligible. I'm going to talk about how to get access to the grant management system. You will not be able to apply for these grants until you have access to that system. Everything is going to go through the GMS, and I'll refer to it as the GMS after this. So getting access is actually not the easiest thing in the world. So I'm going to try and talk you through that so that for the next webinar in this series, you will have access there, and then we can begin the business of actually putting together an application, and I can give you some guidance on some of the parts of that application and what you'll need to actually get the application done. Finally, I'll go over where to find information after this workshop. I'm always here. You can find it from me or send emails. And then we're going to have a question and answer session where you can ask questions in the chat. So the next webinar, which is going to be the how to apply overview, this is going to be the nuts and bolts of the paperwork, uploading papers, the applications, how to answer the long answer questions, things like that. That's going to happen on November 4th, 2024. And I urge you to attend that webinar as it'll be very helpful to make sure that you get a complete application in by the deadline. I want to go over first things first. This is a reimbursement program for diesel equipment upgrades or replacement, which means that we fund you or you get an award for the project. We get a contract for that project created. You do the replacement project, you pay for the replacement project, and then you submit a claim to us in the GMS and we reimburse you for the project. So it's important that you have those funds up front to do the project itself, the replacement that you'd like. There are mandatory cost shares for almost all project types. DERA can only pay a certain percentage of the cost of these projects. It's usually up to about 45, and it often doesn't go over that unless we're talking about something like a retrofit or something that you add on to an engine, things like those kinds of projects. And I'll show you that in a little bit. Federal funds, I've had this question multiple times over the past few days. Federal funds cannot be used to meet any of the cost share requirements. This means that funds cannot be stacked. I know that a bunch of awards have gone out through the IRA and some of the other the infrastructure bills that have awarded folks with clean school buses or replacement of diesel equipment. These are two separate programs. You cannot use federal funds in it twice for any singular project. Okay, so if you got a clean school bus grant, you would not be able to use DERA funds to meet those to meet any more of the fund requirements. Existing diesel equipment must be scrapped. This is a really specific process. It means that the vehicle or the equipment that you were trying to replace has to be rendered completely inoperable. And I'll give you more information on what that looks like. And then you must scrap replaced equipment within 3 months of taking delivery of the new equipment or putting that equipment into service. Whether this means getting tags through to get it on the road or having the infrastructure in place so that you can charge it. Whatever that means, the scrappage has to happen within 3 months of taking delivery, and they're quite strict about this. So we look at those dates and make sure that you're in compliance with this for this grant. We do have some differences between last year and this year. For this year, workforce development funding is eligible. This workforce development, we don't quite know what this looks like yet because we haven't gotten any grants that ask for this. It's possible that you could fund someone, and these would be for electric projects only. It might be possible that you could fund someone taking a short class to learn how to manage the electric vehicle infrastructure for your vehicle, or maintenance on the vehicle, things like that, are eligible under this grant opportunity. And what that looks like is something that we would have to be in discussion about. Finally, last year there were waivers in place for charging infrastructure, but this year those waivers have all expired, which means that all charging equipment must be Buy America, Build America compliant. And there's a list now of the chargers that are compliant, so we have that as a resource if you're looking for that. Finally, we have added bonus points in our criteria for those counties that are covered by a federal major disaster declaration on or after September 2024. This is to mitigate some of the issues that have come from Hurricane Helene. And finally, and perhaps most importantly for the folks on the phone here, this application, this RFP is only going to be open for 60 days, and it will close on New Year's Eve at midnight. And I'll allow you to figure out who is going to be here to answer your questions on New Year's Eve, anywhere near midnight or during that day. So please, you're going to want to get your applications in well before the closing. Here's a timeline of this RFP for 2024. The RFP is open now. You could apply now if you'd like, once you get in the grants management system. It opened on October 15th, a little bit earlier this month. This application and RFP closes December 31st, 2024. We will begin our evaluation in the new year, probably until February, depending on how many applications we get. We can do that sometimes within a month. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. Then we hope to get awards sent out hopefully around March 2025, contracts by April to May, and then all work for these projects for the 2024 awards will have to be completed by September 30th, 2026. So that's the end of all the project dates for any of awards that could be awarded under this particular RFP. This means that to close a project, you would have to submit your invoices, your destruction reports, all your final reports, everything you need to submit a claim would have to be submitted into the GMS by that September 30th, 2026 deadline. So who may apply? Really, this RFP, this opportunity is open to anyone. The only folks that can apply are individuals. So if you're a private or public sector entity that is stationed in North Carolina, you're eligible to apply. Or if your vehicles run in North Carolina for 70% of the time, you're welcome to apply. To apply, you're going to need a tax ID. So this just basically leaves out any kind of individuals. If you want to take a look at the folks who have received these grants in the past, you can follow this link. And one note, we will send out this presentation to all folks that are registered on the webinar. We'll also put it on our webpage for download. And once you download and go into presentation mode, these links become active, so you can follow these links whenever you open up the presentation. All right, so just a brief overview of the kinds of projects that are eligible for this DERA funding. School buses are almost always eligible. Transit buses, which include class 5 diesel-powered medium and heavy-duty transit buses. One thing to note, it's all diesel. We will only replace diesel equipment, so must be diesel. Medium duty or heavy duty trucks. These includes anything over a class 5. Marine engines. These include diesel powered category 1, 2, and 3 marine engines and vessels. Locomotives are eligible, and non-road equipment, which basically could include anything under the sun that is used in construction, cargo handling, agriculture, mining, energy production, things like that. So really, if the equipment that you have takes diesel, it is likely probably eligible under for replacement under this RFP, under the DERA program. Just to give you an idea of where these DERA funding limits are. So if you look at this first one for drayage truck replacement, DERA will fund up to 50% of the truck replacement. And then the minimum mandatory cost share, this fleet owner contribution, is what you, the entity, the organization would have to pay to meet that cost share. And it's 50% of whatever you ask for in the application. It will never be more than that. So it's 50% of the total, or 50%, you know, whichever is less. And so this is just to give you an idea of what these funding limits are in general. To replace diesel to diesel, it usually runs around 25% is what DERA will pay to replace. For anything that's low NOx, which includes a lot of the natural gas engines or some of the CNG replacements, DERA will pay up to 35% of the replacement. For things like EVs with zero emission, DERA will pay 45% of that, and will also pay 45% of the behind the, like, on top of the ground type sort of infrastructure. So the EVs are more expensive. They get a larger cost share. And then, as you can see, there's some other variation in cost shares here too. We have some idle reduction technologies. There's a lot of rules that are involved with these. So if you have any questions, I urge you to reach out to me. We also have a DERA eligibility tool, which I'll show you the link there in a minute, and that will give you an idea of what these kinds of things that you can do in the cost shares that are required. So this link will take you to the DERA eligibilities tool. This is essentially a series of forms that asks you questions about the kind of project that you would like to do. Do you want to do shore power? Do you want to replace do you want to replace a diesel vehicle with a CNG? Do you want to, so it will go through, and then at the end, it will tell you what your cost share will be and ask if you would like to leave your email or something, or for tracking. So that's useful if you have questions about the general what these projects kind of look like, what a marine repower would look like, what a school bus replacement will look like, things like that, because there's just so much. There's a lot of rules in this program, and so this is a way to kind of help y'all determine what you would be on the hook for in your application, or if you were to get the grant. These are some of the projects that we've done. We've done a lot of transit buses. We've done a lot of school buses. We've done some marine replacements. We've done a lot of refuse haulers. Those tend to be good projects. They tend to get a lot of mileage and a lot of use, so they tend to compete really well. Some important criteria for when you're devising your projects: all replaced equipment must be the same weight class of the original vehicle or equipment. It can actually be lower. You just can't go any higher. You would have to replace you can replace a class 6 with a class 5, or a class 6 with a class 6, but you can't replace a class 6 with a class 7. All vehicles and equipment must have at least 3 years of useful life remaining. This is something that you attest to in the application, as well as when you submit your claim. This can be based on your fleet records, how long you keep your vehicles, how long you run your vehicles, how many miles you can expect out of a vehicle. And this can also include any useful life that would happen if you were to sell or donate the vehicle. And then all original equipment, the vehicles that are being replaced, they must be operational in the previous 2 years. So from probably about a year and a half ago until the time of award or the time of replacement, they should be operational. They should be working just fine, and they should be doing their duty cycles. They should operate at least 70% in North Carolina, the replaced vehicles, but then the replacement vehicles should be operated in North Carolina for the next 5 years. And that's so we can get those emissions benefits from the replacement of these older vehicles, this older equipment that tends to be less efficient, that tends to put out more emissions, with newer, cleaner equipment, right? So the North Carolina directly benefits from those replacements. Once again, on-road vehicles must be diesel-powered Class 5 trucks or larger. There are some limits in horsepower increases. You can get up to a 40% increase in horsepower for non-road equipment. The original on-road vehicle, 7,000 miles per year or more, is the lowest amount that would make the vehicle eligible for replacement. Pumps and other off-road equipment like that must operate 250 hours per year or more. And then other non-road engines must operate at least 500 hours per year. So these are the specifications for the replaced equipment. So make sure that in your application that all of your equipment meets these criteria. I said that I would talk to you specifically about what scrappage means. This is the same process that is used throughout all of the EPA replacement programs, the Clean School Bus programs, the VW programs. Scrappage is the same for all of it, and this means that it's rendered inoperable. It can be available for recycle, but what we want to see are pictures of a 3-inch hole in the engine block for all replaced engines. And so we ask for a before picture and an after picture of that hole, because we want to make sure that that engine can't be modified and replaced or rebuilt to continue to put some of those mitigated emissions back on the road, because that's really the objective of this grant program. So also as part of the scrappage, the chassis is cut in half. We ask for pictures for that. So that's the chassis, the frame rails, whatever that looks like in your piece of equipment must be cut in half. And then once again, all equipment must be replaced, all equipment must be scrapped within 3 months of replacement. I want to show you some pictures of what are good pictures for us. As you can see on the left, it's a perfect circle. You don't have to bore a perfect circle like that. You could use a blowtorch. You can use whatever it takes to get that large show that there is no way that you can have any kind of pressure in this system ever again. So we're looking for clear photos that look like this, that engine has been scrapped. And on the right here, you can see the rail, the chassis of, it looks like it's a truck. The chassis has been cut in half, and these pictures are very clear. There is no doubt that those have been scrapped. And the Volkswagen program is strict on this, but EPA, when I do my reports to EPA, they're very specific about what these pictures need to look like. So we need very clear photos of this process in order for you to get your reimbursement. And if we don't have clear photos of the scrappage process, it is possible that you may not be able to be reimbursed. So this is one of the most important parts of this grant. Okay, so this is as an overview of the DERA grant. Obviously, the program guide and the RFP goes through a lot of other types of projects that are eligible. A lot of that will just be looking over the RFP and going through the eligibility tool to see if your project is eligible. But for all intents and purposes, we replace diesel equipment with new equipment. So let's move on to the how to apply. By far, one of the most difficult barriers is getting into the GMS system, the grants management system. The first thing you're going to have to do is to get an NCID in order to request access to the system. If you work for the state or some schools, you may actually have an NCID already. If you have an NCID, then you would just skip to request access. However, if you don't have an NCID, you will have to go to NCID and get that NCID in place. After you get the NCID, you would submit this external request application, and I'm going to show you all this in the next slides. You'll submit this external request application with NCDEQ, Division of Air Quality, for the agency of the request. You'll complete and submit an NC substitute W-9, email that to this email address, and we here actually file those and then submit requests to get into the system. And that NC substitute W-9 is not the federal W-9. It is a specific North Carolina form that you can find on the how to apply part of our webpage for this grant. Once you receive this welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System, that means you're in the GMS. And that means you can begin to fill in an application, you can upload documents, you can start an application, you can, whatever you need to, you can do in the GMS. And then that GMS is accessible through the EBS portal, which is linked as well on our webpage. One thing to remember is this may take up to a week to get processed. So folks, if you're trying to do this December 25th, for a lot of reasons, it's not going to get processed. So we're asking everyone to get into the grants management system first thing. In fact, after you leave this webinar, you should begin to get access to the grants management system. So that NCID, like I said, if you already have an NCID, you can just use that NCID in your application. But if you don't have an NCID, you're going to set up an individual NCID. Okay, I want to make sure everybody heard that. You will be setting up an NCID as an individual, even though you may be representing an entity, you know, such as the city or an organization. Right? You're setting up your own individual NCID for your personal access to the GMS. And we have a pretty good instruction manual for how to create an NCID. If you aren't able to follow along, and you can get it here. So this NCID username, so you see you have the username and then you have your password, which is what you get when you make your NCID, is what you will use to get into the GMS. So the first thing you're gonna do is gonna go into register, down here where the arrow's pointing, and then it's gonna ask you some questions. It'll ask you to form your, get your ID and what your password will be. All right, so we do want your NCIDs to follow a particular format. Usually it's your first name, an initial and a last name. It could be a first and second initial and a last name. It can be, but really it should be related to your name as an individual. So we have some examples: Wiley Coyote. We have Wiley Coyote, Wiley Coyote, et cetera, et cetera. Do not make your NCID the company or organization name, right? We get that a lot. We'll have to send it back to you. Your NCID should be your name. You're essentially working on behalf of an organization to submit this application. Once you get your NCID, this is the form that you can find on our webpage to request access to the grant management system. Okay, so it's the agency up here is going to be NCDAQ. That's us who has the grant management system. That'll put you in the right space to submit the application. And then the rest of the stuff: your last name, your first name, your organization name, the address. So this address is going to be what is listed on the W-9 that you send in along with this access request. So this is the formal organization address, the tax organization address, the city and the state. So this is where the organization would get reimbursed. This is the address that you want to be on your W-2. This is the tax address. Finally, you can either put your work phone and your work email here. Whatever email here that you want to get all of the updates for your application, will return the application to you. That's the email that you want to put in here. And then you will select your role and your actions, and you would just be as a representative or someone that could submit an application. I'm not really sure what that says there. Maybe someone can chime in and help. And then it has a CAPTCHA to prevent robots from joining our organization. So once each organization that you are applying on behalf of. So say you're on a team of grant folks that are applying on behalf of a transit agency. You're allowed to have 2 other friends join you as authorized users and work on that application. Um, but that's it. If you already have folks in the system that are no longer in your organization, we're going to have to pull them off in order to allow other folks in. So you get 3 authorized users, and then once you get this, then this is a web form, so you just submit it, and you submit your W-9 to the email address. You'll get a welcome email from SAP Support Services. Yes, there are a lot of steps. This is why we ask you to do this early, because there can be some snags here. The deadline to request access and get access to the system, or at least request it, is December 9th. If you don't get access by December 9th, it is possible that you will not be able to submit an application. And even if you can submit an application, it's likely that there will be very little support to you at the end of the application period in order to help you create the best application that you can have. So we really want y'all to submit your applications early so we can help you get it up to snuff, so we can make sure that they're good applications. This is the substitute W-9. This is the taxpayer identification number, which will be your organization's tax identification number. So the rest of this is going to be the legal name of the entity, right? So if you have questions about how to fill this out, this is essentially tying your identity to the entity on with whom you are applying, for whom you are applying. So this is all this information is for the entity. Okay, so once you get that welcome to the DAQ Enterprise Business System portal, you'll be able to, there's probably a link in that email that says, hey, come to the portal, and you'll get something that looks like this with the seal in North Carolina, the EBS. And then this is where you type in your NCID and then the password that you created in that first step, and then you'll be able to log on into the system. The GMS is its own kind of beast. It has a lot of ins and outs. We've tried to make it pretty simple. A lot of the next presentation is actually going to be how to navigate the GMS, how to upload information, how to upload your application materials, things like that. So, but we do have a lot of GMS support. We have how to get in the GMS, an external user manual, things like that for support. And you can always call us here at mobile services to help you, sources to help you. Right. So once you get into the GMS, you're going to actually get this is what it's called, the home page or the landing page. And if this is your first time in the GMS, we have some web links, which is the DAQ training library. And so within that, you can go through some tutorials to help you navigate the GMS. There's tutorials on how to submit an application, tutorials on how to upload claims, things like that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is go to create new application, right? This is a new application, and you're going to want to create it. So once you create this new application, it's gonna show you which ones you can apply for, and we're gonna go over through that very thoroughly in the next webinar. So this is just kind of to give you a preview of what this looks like, and you can get into the system in the next couple of weeks if you'd like, and begin an application. There's a lot of things that you're going to need to start doing some homework in order to submit an application. And these are our required application attachments. These include the information that we need about the vehicle or the equipment that you'd like to replace. And so we have the NCDAQ vehicle spreadsheet, which is linked here, and you fill that out with all of the information about the equipment. We would like to see quotes. Quotes are required for all of the new equipment that you're trying to get to replace this old equipment. We need pictures of the original equipment, the engine tags, and the VINs to be submitted with the application. And the reason we do this is because we have a lot of different words and terms for certain kinds of equipment, and they're all, especially non-road equipment, um, that we're not really sure what you call it. It could be a yard dog. It might be, something else. And so we use these pictures and the engine tags and the VINs to figure out what kind of engines and that we're really looking at. Um, and then any supporting documentation for your application. Sometimes if you work for a county or a city, you might need something that says your city council approved this application, things like that. Finally, if you want to do an EV replacement, there's a few extra attachments that are required for those projects. I'm going to go over those in the next slide. For EV projects only, we require an acknowledgement of a consultation with the utility. This will be the utility that would be providing the infrastructure or making sure that your site is able to get the infrastructure that you're looking for. Believe it or not, there are some places where infrastructure doesn't work. So we ask for that consultation. We ask for quotes for the infrastructure, and that includes the installation quote, even if you're doing it in-house, as well as the equipment quote. We ask for an acknowledgement of workforce development. This is really just a letter that says that you're not going to displace any current drivers or any workers with EVs. And this could also include your application for workforce development should you decide to include that in your application. So we would ask for that here. And then any other supporting documentation that you may want to include that would strengthen your application in the various ways that we might be looking for. So this is the NCDAQ spreadsheet. We really want all of these fields filled out. This is what I report to EPA, so I have to have all these fields filled out. So we need all of this from you. There are multiple sheets in the spreadsheet. There's a sheet for on-road. There's a sheet for off-road. There's a sheet for marine. There's a sheet for locomotive. And then there's a sheet for infrastructure, which you should fill out for any EV replacement request with infrastructure. And just so you know, we may go back and forth. There may be revisions to this. So you can upload documents at any time once you submit your application. And I'm going to go through the application in just a minute. So right here, the things we ask for, where is it in operation? A lot of this is so we know what county to put your vehicle replacement project in, the type of equipment, the class of equipment, what it does, if it's construction, if it's municipal. We ask for the VINs, and then the engine information. Finally, some of the most important stuff are these annual miles that are traveled per year, the amount of fuel used, idling hours. We can usually default that, but you may have something that tells you if you have telematics or something. And then the remaining life. And remember, it must have at least 3 years of remaining life to be eligible. The bottom of the spreadsheet is the new vehicle. So this is what you want to replace that vehicle with. So the year is going to be 2024. It may be 2025, actually. We accept either one for that. You're going to do a vehicle replacement. There's a drop down here for what you would like to do. what the class is. This class must be less or the same as the class of the replaced equipment. That's obviously the VIN is to be determined. And then this is where we get some of the cost per unit and some of your cost share information. And then the rest of this is usually filled out after we close out the project. So one thing is that the quotes should match the information found in this spreadsheet. Um, Quotes are usually they usually have a little bit of wiggle room in them. So you should, whatever you put in here is what we're going to put into our system for how much of the how much to be awarded. So this should really be reflective of how much the project will actually cost. And then obviously the infrastructure and the replacement equipment, all of these quotes should match what you're putting in here for each of the vehicles or each piece of equipment that you're replacing. Just some things to know. And these are some of the standard questions that we get. You can't just buy a piece of equipment. Like I said, this is a replacement program, a scrappage program, so you're not allowed to increase your fleet size. The replacement is like for like, so if you're replacing a yard dog with a yard dog, you're replacing a dozer with a dozer, things like that. Your budget information should be as accurate as possible. We may use partial funding, which means we may only say you put in an application for 10 vehicles, we may only fund 5 of those. So we reserve the right to partially fund projects and vehicles as well. Applications must be submitted. I'm not sure if I've said this enough yet. Must be submitted to the grants management system before 11:59 p.m. December 31st, 2024. So that's New Year's Eve. You're really not allowed to do any work until the contract is fully executed. So we ask that you don't sign any agreements with vendors because technically that would be a project that has started before application, before award, and so it would not be eligible to be reimbursed. We may get your application, and the DERA program can sometimes is used for the grade program in Charlotte. There are some other programs that do replacements, so we may share your application with similar funding opportunities if your project is not funded. And then finally, the GMS, once you're in, you're going to want to access it maybe every couple of months because it will boot you out if it renders you inactive, and you may have to request access again. So and you're going to use if you do get awarded, you're going to use the GMS for the rest of the duration of the project. You don't only use it for the application and all the back and forth that you will have with me for evaluating your application, but it will also be during the agreements process. We use the GMS for agreements as well as the claim process. So when you upload everything to get your reimbursement. And just to remember, an application and award in the spring is not a fully executed contract. Just an idea of what our scoring criteria looks like. The bulk of the scoring comes from the efficacy of the emissions reductions from the replacement of a vehicle. So we measure this with lifetime emissions reductions and lifetime cost effectiveness, which is how much emissions reductions we're getting per dollar for our DERA dollar. So really, how those emissions reductions are based on the age of the vehicle, the mileage of the equipment, the hours of the equipment, how much diesel it's using in its duty cycle, things like that. So that's where most of that scoring is coming from. We look at co-benefits, so some of the other emissions and other kinds of co-benefits that are a part of that. There's an environmental justice score, which is assigned to each county. We have EPA priority counties. These are counties that the EPA prioritizes, so we have some bonus points for those. And those are Cabarrus, Gaston, Iredell, Lincoln, Mecklenburg, Rowan, and Union. We have bonus points for a historically under-resourced county, and we have a list of those. We have bonus points for electric projects. They are usually less, honestly, much less cost effective, and so it's tough for them to be on par with some of these other cheaper replacements. So there's some bonuses there, and that's in line with some of the um, uh, Governor Cooper's EO 80 for more electrification. We also have bonus points for minority or women-owned business. You should include this information in your application. We're not going to look it up because we don't really know. So you should include this in some of the long answer portion of the application. Bonus points for goods movement facility. These are usually ports. They can be warehouse distribution centers, things like that. And we can usually tell if it's a good movements facility, but you should also indicate that in your application. And finally, we have the new points for the federal major disaster area. And so those counties, I think, have been declared recently. Just a note on environmental justice. It's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. So historically, uh, people of color and low income and other vulnerable populations have been disproportionately exposed to harmful pollutants. So the NOx and the PM 2.5 that for diesel engines are often much higher in some of these less populous and more rural and poorer areas. And so we do have some points to sort of mitigate that through environmental justice, and just some ideas of how we got the environmental justice scores. This is the historically under-resourced county map. So if you're in one of the blue counties, actually not if you are in it, but if your replacement vehicle, if the vehicle that you are hoping to replace does most of its duty cycle in one of these counties, it will be eligible for some of those under-resourced points that are in the criteria. And then here's a list of those counties. A few helpful hints. I'll say it again. Please apply early. The earlier you apply, the more we can help you with your application. Finally, the thing you have to do before that December 31st, 2024 is submit a complete application. It may require, if we're looking at it, some back and forth for us to update your spreadsheet or things like that, but you will not be able to submit after that December 31st. Once the application closes, it's closed, and we will not accept late applications. So finally, if you have questions, if you have any concerns, that's part of why we're doing this webinar right now, is so that we get in front of these. We want you to make sure that you contact us for assistance before the application closes in the next couple of months, so we can help you. Okay, so I alluded to a lot of the stuff that's going to happen. It's too much for just one webinar throwing all of this at you, because right now we're really talking about what kinds of projects are eligible, what kinds of some of the rules when it comes to the DRR RFP, when it comes to the program guide, things like that. But next time we're actually going to focus. You've realized that your project is eligible. You have gotten, you know what your engine looks like. You know what tier it is. You know how many vehicles. You know where they operate. We're going to really go into how to apply, how to create a really competitive application that will get evaluated and potentially get funded. So that's what the next webinar will focus on. That's going to be November 4th. By then, if you do your homework, we hope you have requested by the NCID that you have completed and signed your W-9 form, and that you have requested access to the GMS and received that welcome email. Because if you go into that GMS and start to look around and kind of get a feel for it, you'll be in much better shape to receive the information that I will present on November 4th. And it will just be easier for you in the long run. So additionally, even in the next couple weeks after that November 4th webinar, if you need help to apply, if you have all this stuff ready to go, it'll be a cakewalk. So the things that you're going to want to have are the fleet description data sheet. So that's that spreadsheet with the information, all the pictures that you want for replacement. Like I said, we need the pictures of the equipment, the pictures of the plate, the engine plate, as well as the VIN, and that's so we can figure out what kind of equipment we're actually dealing with. Sometimes it's not super clear. And then for EV projects with infrastructure, you should have already contacted your utility. You should know what you're paying for when it comes to how much it would take to charge an electric piece of equipment. Okay, so after this webinar, you can send questions regarding really anything that we've talked about, what's eligible, the application. You could send that to DAQ MSCB NCDAQ grants at daqnc.gov. I realize that that is a very long email address, but if you download this PowerPoint, all of these links are live, and you can follow it, and you can just send an email, as well as the downloadable GMS external users manual. Um, Finally, there's a separate system with EBS and us, who is the NCDAQ, the application folks. So if there are technical difficulties once you have been granted, say you have error messages or something funny is actually in the platform, then you would go to EBS support services. But you're welcome to email us, and we'll send you in the right direction. Finally, if you're not on our email list, please subscribe, and you will get information of everything, which includes how to sign up for the November 4th webinar, what we have awarded, things like that. So all of the pertinent information about any grants that we do here that you might be interested in. And so here are our contacts. I am Sheila Blanchard. Again, I'm the primary DERA state administrator for North Carolina. We've got Matthew Hoskins, who's my right-hand man, and then Stephen Rice, who's supervisor, and all of us can help you really with a lot of the stuff that has been presented today and that will be presented on November 4th. And finally, in this, we have put all of these useful links into a page for you when you download this presentation, that will kind of get you started on the roadway to submitting an application. And I think with that, I can answer some questions if you have any.
All right, thank you for the presentation, Sheila. Give you a quick second to catch your breath after doing all that. So we've got a couple minutes left here for questions. If we go past, we might run over a couple minutes, but I'll try to get through them fairly quickly. A reminder to anybody who called in, you can press *3 to raise your hand, and then we can unmute you and let you talk. But anybody who's on their computer, submit your questions in this Q&A box, and we will get to it. So I'll start at the top here. First question, is this funding opportunity stackable with EPA funding?
Sorry, I was muted. No, it is not. Um, no federal funds can be used to meet any mandatory cost shares for any other federal programs. That includes EPA's Clean School Bus. That would include CMAQ. That includes a lot of the federal funding that's coming through right now.
And that leads into another question we have, pretty similar. So somebody said that they believe CMAQ was USDOT, so probably not stackable. But do we have any suggestions for co-funded projects? where,
Ooh.
we fund certain vehicles, they fund other vehicles.
Well, if they're different vehicles, you are welcome to apply. If you we just can't if you just had one vehicle, you wouldn't be able to use CMAQ funds for half of it and DERA for the other half, is what that means. But if you have a whole fleet transition that you're trying to fund, and you've got 10 vehicles that you want to apply for DERA funding, and then 20 vehicles that you want to apply to CMAQ, that's perfectly acceptable because they're technically considered two different projects. But within the vehicle itself, it would not be stackable.
All right. Another question here. Can you post a link to the list of BABA compliant charging equipment?
I will, yes, I will, I'll make a note and I will try and see if I can find that again. It keeps changing. So I'll see if I can find it. Maybe one of my team members on the webinar could do a quick search and see if they could find that link and post it in the chat for me.
And related to that, we got a question. For electrification projects, are there any additional requirements for charging equipment beyond the BABA requirements?
Hmm.
So, for example, manufacturer, power output,
No,
connectors.
no, it just needs to be able, usually with some of these heavy duty applications, there are chargers, there's requirements for those chargers, and usually those things, electric vendors are selling these in tandem with infrastructure. So those would be the only requirements. It must be able to charge the equipment that you're buying.
So there's another one about charging here. They were asking if charging stations can be purchased, and if so, do they have to be accessible to the public?
For the purposes of DERA, no. These for DERA, charging equipment is only funded along with some kind of application, with some kind of vehicle, whether it's on road or off road. So that charging would essentially be for that vehicle. It can be used for maybe other vehicles on the lot if you're in a goods movement facility or something like that. We have charging that's used for 2 yard dogs maybe instead of one. But it wouldn't generally would not likely be accessible to the public for the kinds of applications that we fund.
All right. Question here, is fuel usage accepted as an alternative to the mileage reports?
Fuel usage is used as the primary thing that we calculate for non-road equipment, but we also ask for hours for those non-road equipment. Um, we're definitely going to need the mileage and the hours for any equipment that you submit in an application, as well as the fuel use. It's hard for us. We can't really calculate the efficiency of certain kinds of engines, which is what you would need to be able to get one from the other.
Another one here, are biodiesel trucks eligible?
For they are eligible as replacement. They are not eligible to be replaced.
Mhm. So for the bonus points for priority counties and EJ areas and such, are those based on the domicile address or are those where the vehicle operates?
That will be where the vehicle operates. And you may have multi counties in your application, but when we do the evaluation, we evaluate each vehicle separately when we do those emissions reductions. So those points will be ascribed to the vehicle for wherever it is operating.
Right, and another one here about their company purchased a 26-foot box truck to use as a delivery vehicle. They are planning to replace that vehicle with an EV pickup truck. Is that allowed under the equipment replacement grant?
Um, I think we could only fund a class 5 over replacement vehicle. So as long as it's over a class 5.
Right.
So I'm not sure if like what you mean by a pickup truck. Um, but I'm not sure if they would go over, but you would have to have at least a class 5 to replace a box truck. Deere won't buy any equipment that's under a class 5.
And the last question I see here from Amy Armbruster, can you put that email address in the chat? And I'm assuming that's going to be the longer one that you wrote out. But Amy, if you are looking for something else, you can send that in the chat. And I did have another question come in.
Okay.
Can charging stations be purchased solely if they have electric transit vehicles already? Can they purchase charging stations?
If they are funded for a transit vehicle, then they are able to ask for infrastructure for that transit vehicle. It does not go backwards. So the vehicle gets funded, you're allowed to ask for infrastructure. So there's no standalone infrastructure that is funded under DERA.
Right, so that is the last of the questions I see now. If you've got any burning questions, get them in. Um, I do have to make a plug. We do have an upcoming webinar on Monday. So we're doing a webinar for our Volkswagen community and destination ZEV infrastructure. So we're going to be announcing a new program for destination charging infrastructure. Um, and so that webinar is Monday at 2 p.m. So if that's something you're interested in, um, if you don't have the link to that already, you can email one of us and we can get that link to you. I do have another question came in. I'll get this one last one. Lawnmowers that have VINs, are they able to qualify for this grant?
Yeah, they should, provided they operate, I can't remember, I believe 500 hours a year. They should.
Right, perfect. So that is all the questions we have today. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this webinar and thank you, Sheila, for the wonderful presentation. A reminder, we will be sending out this recording to everybody who registered for the webinar. So you can check out all the links that are in the slides, review all the slides again. So I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you very much.